Hi, it's Mark Rushton of markrushton.com. This is a little bit different video here. Bob Fridley has died. Robert L. Fridley, almost 104 years old. And I want to kind of share my thoughts on working with him back in the 1980s. And it's being handled by McLaren Rest Haven in West Des Moines. Yeah, he was born March 22nd, 1917. He was just a little bit over 50 years older than me, and died on February 3rd, 2021. And what a remarkable man. I have nothing but good things to say about him. He had his quirks like anybody. Well, I have nothing but good things to say about Bob. Bob gave me a job when he didn't have to give me a job. And he did a lot of nice things for me. And I kind of want to talk about, and he did a lot of nice things for Des Moines and small towns in Iowa. And I kind of want to talk about that because if there is a mention of his death, like in the newspapers or in the news, it's going to be passing. And the way they write things these days, you never know what they're going to stick in there. So I kind of want to share some of my thoughts, not all of my thoughts. I do want to hold a few things back that were funny, humorous, that friends of mine or people I worked with who knew him, we can laugh about on our own, a private moment. I'm not going to tell you all the good stories. I'll just tell you some of them. So Bob ran movie theaters in Iowa. In fact, Fridley Theaters is still running. And of course, the business these days, movie theaters, is just nearly impossible. I don't know how they're going to stay in business. But let me give you a little bit of history. So there was a movie theater near where I grew up in Des Moines on the south side. It was called the Wakanda, Wakanda. It's a shopping center. And they had a movie theater in there. And just a single movie theater, because that's how things were back then. And it closed for a long time. And then I think about 79 or 80, Bob Madison and his wife Linda started the movies 1 and 2. They converted part of the lobby into a what they call a screening room for smaller films, foreign films, artsy stuff, uncommercial things. And I believe the screening room held 49. And you only had one door. So if you had 50 seats in there, you'd have to have 2 doors, and they only had 1 door. And Bob was a police officer and movie nut, and Linda was a movie nut. And then at some point in time, I think about 1983 or so, Bob bought the movie theater for whatever reason. I don't know. The movie business is tough. There was a lot of, even back then, because there were other art theaters in town. There was the Varsity up by Drake, which was run by Bev Mahon. And Bev and Bob had been partners in some movie theaters, I believe, in Des Moines. I think they owned the Holiday, which was on Southwest 9th, which after Bob and Bev kind of split, Bev got the Varsity, and I think the Holiday too. And the Holiday is where they showed things like the Rocky Horror Picture Show for years, and Caligula, junk like that. And then the Varsity showed arty stuff, and Bob owned the Sierra 3 also, and he would occasionally play. At some point, he acquired the Sierra. It might have been owned by the other company, but anyway, he got the Fine Arts 1 and 2, and he renamed it it was the movies 1 and 2, and then he renamed it the Fine Arts. And I got a job there when I was 16 years old, just before I was 17. I think it was like 1984. Hard to get jobs back then. I was working in the footwear department of Kmart, which was leased. So I didn't work technically for Kmart. I was looking for another job because, 16 years old, footwear department at Kmart. But yeah, it was hard to get in. I loved movies. I'd been going to the movies 1 and 2. I saw so many great movies there. I saw The Tree of Wooden Clogs. All sorts of things. Really, always loved art movies, independence, foreign films, that sort of thing, and the classics too. Bob and Linda kind of ran it as sort of the repertory, so the older films, and then they would also play newer, like a lot of British things, some French things, and American independent stuff. We'll get more into that here in a little bit here, but Bob bought it, and then Bob and Linda continued to run it, and so I worked there in high school, and got to meet and interact with Bob Fridley over the years, and Bob Madison would try to book certain movies in there, and it was sometimes it was difficult to get certain things in there. Bev would bid them higher, or you couldn't get it for a long time. It was the way distribution was back in the day with film. You couldn't get the movie. It's so it'd be like, oh, this movie that's doing great in New York and Chicago and LA. There's only so many prints available. So the Des Moines market's not going to get it for 9 months, right? And then Bev's going to outbid Bob, and that was always fun. But the main movie for me was us getting Spinal Tap, and I've mentioned this in previous videos. Bob and Linda had gone up to Minneapolis and had seen the movie and came back and was just like, "This movie is just crazy. And he's like describing it. And I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about, but this sounds like fun. And then we did a promotion with KGGO, 95 KGGO, the Des Moines rock station, and they gave away, I don't know how many they gave away there. They gave away 152 person passes, right, on the radio. And I think I'm not quite sure how many showed up, maybe 75 or 80 couples. The theater was maybe half full. And within 10 or 15 minutes, numerous people were walking out of the movie theater. I've never heard of this band. I don't know any of their music. Completely did not get it. Completely didn't get it. Bob Madison was out in the lobby just going, no. You see, it's a mockumentary and it's a comedy, and I don't know. I'm leaving. I don't know this. And then I told some of my friends, and got them in there, and they all got it. And of course, it became a cult classic. Now it's just like a total classic. You got so many great scenes in that movie. But Bob Madison he was very particular about the presentation and the sound, getting all the channels to work and everything like that. And Bob Madison would have it loud. This is a rock film, right? He did that with concert films. He'd play them loud, right? And Bob Fridley would come in. He's like, it's too loud. He'd turn it down. Constant war. So it was quirks like that, But I think Bob, he was how old was he at the time? He was near 70. He was like 60. How old would he have been at 67 years old at the time that we played Spinal Tap? So he's probably losing his high-end frequencies like I am now. So it sounds weird. And so I can understand why he would do that. But I think Bob Madison thought Mr. Fridley is just turning it down because he doesn't like the rock music to be super loud. That might have been it too. I don't know. But so that was fun. That was fun. And I worked there through 1984, 1985, and the beginning of 1986. And late in 1985, after I'd graduated high school and I was just sort of working some jobs or whatever, I didn't want to go to college. I didn't know what I wanted to do. And Mr. Fridley came up to me one day and asked me, say, "Oh, Mark, so what are you doing? You graduated. What are you doing? Are you just working or what?" And, "Yeah, I'm just working. I haven't quite figured out what I want to do yet." He said, "Come down to my office." Go down to his office. "How'd you like to run a movie theater?" I'm like 18 years old. Not almost 19, not quite, but I'm 18 years old. He's like, "You seem like a good kid. How'd you like to run a movie theater?" Okay, well, what do you got? So he had Jefferson. He had a movie theater in Jefferson, Iowa. He had a movie theater in Cherokee, Iowa. And he had a movie theater in North Kansas City that needed new managers. And so one day, I must have been the winter of early 1986, or maybe it was late 1985. We went out and he made the rounds. I know he had like a van and some people that would deliver the films. Most of the time, they were just moving them from city to city. But Bob would make the rounds, and most of his movie theaters were up north. You know, they were like Carroll and Emmitsburg and again Jefferson and Nevada, and they were just single theaters in small towns. And he had video rental in the lobby because that was a thing then. Big diversify, which is good. And so he would just pack the Buick up full of stuff, and we made the rounds. And wasn't sure about moving to a small town like Cherokee or Jefferson. It looked like a fine theater, but I was let's move to the big city, right? Kansas City, kind of fun. So ultimately, we went down. We were going to go down there, and Bob was like, "Hey, I'd like your parents to come along and on the trip, right? Just because we're going to go down there for the day, and you're still kind of a kid, and I just wanted kind of get their approval, even though you're 18." So that was really nice, man. That was really pretty respectful of him. And so my parents came along. We went down there. I think it was on a weekend, and saw the theater, and it was just a filthy mess. It was just a filthy mess. But then before we got there, though, we stopped by the Empire Theater in downtown Kansas City, and that's where I first met the Mossman twins and Wade Williams, who had restored the Granada in Kansas City, Kansas. And we stopped at the Empire because Bob, the Empire had been this huge theater, over 1,000 seats. I think it's been restored, if I'm not mistaken. But at the time, early 1986, I think it was. He was that they'd closed it, and so they wanted to get all the seats out of it, the lighting, the chandeliers, the wall sconces, everything must go. They're going to strip it down, right? So we got to tour the Empire after it was, split up into four. I think it was 4 screens. There was 2 uppers, a lower, and then there was like a little, again, like it was like a screening room type of thing for the art things. And we went through there with, I don't know if it was both. I know I met Brian Mossman for the first time, and Wade was there, Wade Williams, and they kind of led Bob through, and Bob was just like, "Yeah, I'll buy that. I'll buy that. I'll buy. How many sconces are there? I'll buy them all. Yeah, I'll get that. I want to buy that chandelier." He's bought everything. Yeah, I'll buy that. Just, yeah, send it up to my office in Des Moines. Brilliant. It's amazing. And then ultimately I decided on Kansas City and worked there for about a year and a half. And that's a whole nother story, but tried, it was just a dumpy little theater with roof problems and plumbing problems. And uh, uh, when I said that I wanted to move back to Iowa and go to school, um, I think at that time he had decided that, um, or sometime after I decided to resign and come back to Iowa, and gave him a date and everything like that. I think somewhere in there, he wasn't sure about keeping it, made somebody else the manager, and then he said, we're going to close it down, because all of his theaters were in Iowa except for this one in North Kansas City, and then he had owned one that was in Mission, Kansas, and the one in Mission he was selling back to Ben and Brian Mossman. And so you had this odd movie theater out in a completely separate state. And his secretary, Ellie, I remember Ellie, she's the best, didn't take any crap. I liked her. A lot of extra work, a lot of extra taxes, and it wasn't worth it. Even though the theater did make money, and the video rental did make money, but the rent was super cheap. There's a dumpy building, and it has been since then. It has been, I believe, it's been rehab. That somebody went in there and spent a lot of money, and then they bought a couple places next to it, so they have multiple screens there where the movie theater was, and so they've kind of expanded that, so it's its own thing down there now in North Kansas City. But yeah, and it was fun. I'll use, for example, being 19 years old in the big city, and uh, going in and picking up the movies, because they were in the huge canisters, and you had to put them together. And but the thing was that he always had a line of credit with the video distributors. This is back when you had videotapes, VHS videotapes. And back then, this was before Blockbuster, you had a lot of ma and pa video rental stores in different parts of the city, way before consolidation of the big chains, which are now gone. And so there was a distribution company down there called Sight and Sound. And Bob already had his lines of credit and deals worked out with the one in Des Moines, and we went to the one in Des Moines. Well, I'll tell you about that eventually. But Sight and Sound was the distributor down in the Kansas City area, and they were just over I think they were in KCK, right off the interstate. And I remember going in there, and I worked mainly with this one gal, and she was great, fun to work with. And she'd gotten a T-shirt. It was a Spike Lee "She's Got to Have It" T-shirt, and she's like, "We got so many of these. You want one?" So I had the Spike Lee "She's Got to Have It." I remember seeing that in Kansas City at the Crown Plaza. I think I was just about the only white guy in the movie theater, and it was nuts. It was crazy, hilarious. But so we went to Sight and Sound, and so I worked with some people there. And I remember the guy that ran the place, he had a framed poster of Louis Buñuel's The Discreet Charm of the Bourgeoisie. He's like, "This is my favorite movie." Let's get that great photo of the lips, and Buñuel hated that poster, but fantastic movie. And so these were like real movie people, and they would try to get me to well, you might want to get this one, or what, this one's on deal, and this one's doing well here. And, I was just this little shop or whatever. But the odd thing about me was, unlike these ma and pa stores, Bob, because he had, I don't know how many theaters he had now at the time, 35 or 40 or something like that. Most of them had video rental. He had a big extra video rental store, a couple of them called the Video Warehouse. One of them the last one finally just closed in Des Moines. And so for me down in Kansas City, he got a line of credit through there. And it was weird for me to go back into the warehouse there and pick things out and pick things up that we had pre-ordered, the big titles and stuff like that, how many we were going to get and rent out. And so you get this 19-year-old kid, me, going in there, and I get just signed for it. And all the other people are just like, why is that kid signing? Why is that kid signing off on $1,000 worth of videotapes? That was fun. And then Bob, no. This was in Des Moines. No. This was Kansas City. Bob came back down another time. He came down very infrequently after that. But one time he decided to pick some extra things up at Sight and Sounds. We went there. Brian Mossman was there, and maybe Ben too. I think it was just Brian. And they were giving away a pool table. So we were playing pool in the warehouse and stuff like that. And so then Bob showed up, and we were going through and picking out stuff. And Brian was talking about what rents good at his theater. His was more of an art theater. And I talked about what rented good in North Kansas City. And Bob was always interested in hearing what did well, because he was on the hunt for. He was into art movies and independence and stuff like that, but he was also into what made money. And so he'd ask me, "Oh, well, Mark, what's doing good at your theater?" And I said, "Faces of Death is out every single night. I wish I had a few extra copies, right? Because it was those videotapes where see people. I didn't even know, people dying, people get eaten by a tiger or something like that. Or, it was just that early sort of exploiting death and all that sort of stuff. I said, "Oh, Faces of Death, man, that thing's off the shelf every night." We were like right where the Faces of Deaths were, right? And literally this happened. Bob took his arm out and shoved all those videotapes into his cart. All of them. He just took them all and was just like, "Rah." That was great. How much money did that make him over there? Probably a lot of money. Those videotapes. They didn't cost much. They were kind of expensive then. I mean, their Faces of Death was like $20 or $30. Maybe it was $40 or something like that. You'd rent them out for $3 or $4 a night. You'd make your money back in no time at all. It was a good earner. And so there was like Faces of Death 2, number 3, it was a big series, and that sort of stuff. And other movies that we picked out over time, which I will not go into. It was the other movies. Bob took some of my suggestions on that. Probably made him a bunch of money on that too. But we won't go into that. Discretion. It's a movie biz for you. So he was a lot of fun to work with. He's a very busy man. I remember we were riding around one time, and this was right when mobile phones had started. And but he would, like, when he was at the movie theater, he would always making calls, calling back to the office, and doing it that way. And I said, "What, you ever thought about maybe getting like one of those car phones or whatever like that?" And he said, "Mark, when I'm in my car, it's the only time where I have time to kind of like, nobody's bothering me, right? Nobody's calling me. No one's trying to get a hold of me or anything like that. It's my only refuge. So I never want to have a car phone. And I thought that always stuck with me. And of course, now everybody has a car phone and everybody's all this, that, Bluetooth, everything. And I always thought that was pretty amazing. Yeah, I'm in my car. I just want to listen to the radio. I just want to listen to some music. I just want to talk to people. I don't want to be on the. I guess I'd be on the phone 24 hours a day. It'd drive me nuts. I thought that was pretty brilliant. And he drove, I think, almost all the way up here in the memories here. Yeah, it was like they were talking about here. Yeah, Bob traveled to see our renovation progress at the young age of 101. My parents, he'd always go out to Dolls out on Fleur Drive and have lunch out there in the deli, in the restaurant. And my dad would see him drive in his Lincoln Continental with his hat and his overcoat, and he was like, yeah, I think he was 99 at the time. It was amazing. And where are we going back up here? Going back up here. We'll put the big photo in here. This is probably about the time. This is probably about the time that I worked with him. This is how he looked, and yeah. But as far as culturally in Des Moines, running the fine arts, and then later that closed, and he moved I think he bought the Sierra 3, which was out on 22nd Street in West Des Moines, and turned that kind of into an art theater. And let me think about everything here if I can. But he was not afraid to play controversial stuff, at least in the 80s. He had some opinions about some movies later on that he got, like the local media would give him crap for, and I'm sure they'll have to mention that because that's the way they are. But he played movies in the 80s, like The Fourth Man, which was I can't ever pronounce his name. The director, Paul Verhoeven or something like that. I don't know exactly how to pronounce his last name. This is before he became a big Hollywood director. He was directing movies, I think, in Sweden. And The Fourth Man was, I think it was rated X, because there was a scene where something got cut off and there was blood, and it was, obviously fake, but he had no problem playing a movie like that, right? And and yeah, and just as long as it, there was an audience for that sort of thing. He played the Gods Must Be Crazy for like 2 years in Mission, Kansas, and then we got to play it for a couple of weeks at the Dollar Theater once it ended its run and that was crazy. He was just into those sorts of things, but he was also into restoring these movie theaters in the small town. He spent a lot of money at the movie theater, renovating the movie theater in Nevada, Iowa, which is just east of Ames. That was like his baby. And he would tell me about it. Just took years and years and so much money. I'm never going to make my money back. But it's a beautiful theater, and I wanted to, he did his best. He also got into movie producing. He did a movie, I think, with Zsa Zsa Gabor in the 70s, if I'm not mistaken. And then he also did this movie called The Curious Case of the Campus Corpse. And it was renamed The Hazing. It starred Charles Martin Smith. And the only reference I see to Bob here is in IMDb. The movie was a production of two theater owners in Des Moines, Robert Fridley and Dick Davis. And it didn't do very well, right? Movie production's not that easy. I remember him telling me when we were driving down to Kansas City, he told me stories about going out to LA, meeting Zsa Zsa Gabor and all that sort of stuff, and all that sort of thing. But anyway, But yeah, he he was interested in the movie, the cultural aspect of where I grew up, and I think that's important. And yeah, he was. It's he lost money on a lot of movies, but then he would have these big hits every now and then, and then he's dueling with Bev Mahon, and that was always interesting. And so yeah, but it was strange. He would spend like at the fine arts, we had this beautiful waterfall curtain that he had installed, and it cost a lot of money. It was very, very nice. But then he would do things like he had the oddest toilet paper in the bathroom. It was weird. And then he wouldn't have he didn't have Coke or Pepsi at the time because that was more expensive. So he had like cola, which was like a cola, and then these other and then he was into real butter. So we'd always have to skim the butter fat off, which was great because we just put that on the popcorn. But because he didn't like the industrial stuff that the chains put on, he thought that was cheap. So he was quirky, but I get it, I get it. And yeah, he was very late to computerizing his inventory for his video. There's an old joke. He operated on a change box and a Rolodex, literally, because like the Mossman twins, they had Macs, they had the little Macs and barcodes for their videos in 1986, 1987, and they were trying to convince Bob, you got to inventory control and management of your titles and stuff. So I'm sure a lot of things got lost or whatever. I certainly know with the movie theater that I ran, we had video rental, and VCRs were kind of expensive back then. $350, $400. We would rent them out because they were expensive items. And when I joined up, they were like just 20 or 30 of them were unaccounted for. Like, what's the inventory? I was like, what is the inventory? It's like these, stolen, came back broken, don't know where it is. A lot of stuff like that. So just manually controlling that sort of shrinkage was very, very difficult. People, stealing movie videotapes and stuff like that, writing bad checks. It was, it was back in the day, right? But you were making so much money on those on the video rentals then. It was absolutely crazy. You could charge $3.50, $4 a night to have a movie, to rent out a movie on videotape. That was a thing. Nowadays we just we just stream it from Netflix or we can go buy a DVD somewhere at the Salvation Army for 99 cents, $1.99 or something like that. And it comes 5-to-1 cinema, a couple more extra for a Blu-ray. But things were different back then. Things were different. Bob loved the old movies, man. He loved the old movies. He loved old Hollywood. His favorite movie, I remember this, he'd say that his favorite movie was The Long, Long Trailer with Lucy and Desi. I don't know how many times I heard, maybe I heard that from Bob and Linda, but he might have said that too. But he loved those old movies. He loved the musicals. He loved to play the old musicals. I'm trying to remember all the names. Stuff from the 30s and the 40s. That's in the 50s even. And I think that's where Bob and Linda Madison and Bob Fridley really met. They loved the older stuff, the repertory, the art. And I think, to be able to bring that into a town, just the size of Des Moines at the time, what was the metro? The town was like 200,000, but the metro area wasn't that much bigger. The burbs weren't that huge then. It might have been 350 or something like that. I think now it's like 650. The burbs have expanded considerably, but those sorts of cultural things where people come in and watch a movie, watch that kind of movie, it's largely over. And then we would have the local movie reviewer from the Des Moines, Joan Bunkie. She was so tall and so nice. She was nice. She was a really, really nice person. I encountered her many, many times, or I'd have to string up Joan's coming in. Can you screen the movie for her? I think I did that once or twice. Or I, got to watch it while she was in there. I remember watching Birdie. So she got to see it in advance. And she asked me my opinion. I think that mention of what I said got into the review. That was kind of fun. But that's back when you had somebody locally writing movie reviews. And she did it very, very well. I agreed with most of her reviews. Sometimes she wasn't as nice as the movie theater owner would like them to be. We paid so much for just to get, that's the way movies were done then and probably today. You pay an upfront amount and then a high percentage goes back to the distributor based on a series of weeks that you do it. But, we only got a 3-star review. And it's like, whatever. And the great thing about working at a theater like that, you'd see people all the time and come in, I still remember the time I was buying the popcorn. Bill Reichardt came in and he owned the store. He was in those ads. He had a clothing store over in Roosevelt Shopping Center. One time he came in and I was like, it's Bill Reichardt. It's just, I've been wearing the suit for 20 years. It's just a little worn here. It's impeccably dressed. So you'd see things like that. It was great. It's great. Then there'd be many nights where it'd be like, like the weather today, it's whatever it is outside, 5 degrees, and nobody'd show up. He'd still have to heat the barn. So, yeah, he had his quirks too. But I have nothing but good memories of Bob. Bob was very nice to me. He didn't have to offer me a job at the age of 18 to run a movie theater. I got that, and 180 miles away from home. It was a little crazy, but I worked all the time, man. Every now and then I would take like a day or two off, and but I would drive back up to Des Moines. But I would always like have a box of stuff to bring to him, and he'd have stuff to bring to me. So it was, I was still working kind of. But I mean, back then, I was working, 70, 80 hours a week and loving every minute of it. It was great. It was great. It was fun. You could only do that when you're that age, right? But so I've always appreciated, the opportunity that he gave me, and he was so nice about it. And I was very happy with my work at the theater. There's only so much I could do, I couldn't give anybody raises. I didn't even get a raise the whole time I worked. I never got any vacation time. The only time I ever had a vacation time was when I took a day off, and usually it was to drive back to Des Moines to haul stuff. So the idea of I didn't even understand the concept of vacation time. Like today, I'd be like, "What? Don't I get 2 weeks of vacation?" Right? Back then, you just worked all the time and loved it. Yeah, I couldn't give raises. That was a problem. And the building was just not in good shape. Had a lot of problems. The rent was cheap, $500 a month. You can make money if the rent's $500 a month. You can make money pretty much anywhere. And and then okay. So last August, when the windstorm came through and our power was out for several days, we went down to Washington, Iowa for a few days until the power came back on. And down there is, what's the name of the movie theater in Washington? Is it the State or the Stand? Or I can't remember the name of it. Anyway, it's a Fridley theater, and it's the oldest operating movie theater in the world. Started showing movies in 1897. I'm sure they continued to do like vaudeville and stage shows up to a certain period in time, but it's always been a movie theater, and it's been showing movies since 1897. And yeah, he owns that one. He owned that one, right? They were playing Jaws there at the time, to which I said to my wife, did they remake Jaws? Did they do that? Because they always seem to be remaking everything, because we can't come up with new ideas, right? Can't come up with anything new. But yeah, Bob was a great man. He's a great man, and I've nothing but good things to say about him. He provided a lot of work experience for me, and uh, really enjoyed my time working for him. Uh, in retrospect, at the time, it was a lot of work. It was a lot of work, but I really appreciate that. And then I moved back and moved on from there. But yeah, Bob Fridley. Yeah, here's a picture of him. 101. Yeah, he doesn't look that much different. And yeah, he loved the movies, man. He loved the movies. I'd love to see other people's take on it, but he was a very important uh, cultural provider for the Des Moines community back at least in the 80s when I was around. Um, Probably so with Video Warehouse, because he had titles. He had so many titles that a lot of the other stores didn't have, if I'm not mistaken. And uh, well, anyway, that's it. I've rambled enough right now, but uh, yeah, he lived to be almost 104. Almost 104. Here we go. March 22, 1917 to February 3, 2021. So, yeah, I think he had a pretty good life. Pretty good life, man. And yeah, thanks for the opportunity. Thanks for the opportunity, and thanks for what you did for the for the community, and not just in Des Moines, but in the small towns all around Iowa. Because he came in, and a lot of these communities, you had the school districts were consolidating, and then the theaters. Just it was not easy to run just a single movie theater in a small town, and you had to have that sort of you had to be owned by a bigger company that can distribute those films. Back in the day, that was the economics of it. And then, of course, video rental. Again, it was largely ma and pa shops everywhere, and he was just the ma and pa shop everywhere. He would either rent a place right next to the movie theater or have it there in the lobby if the lobby was big enough. And that was lifeblood. So if you had the movie business wasn't doing good, the video rental business was doing better over time. But now it's just there's no video rental, and movie theaters are just on life support, if not dead already. So it'd be interesting to see what happens in the future. All right, I've rambled enough. That's it. I might make a video later today. It is Saturday, February 6, 2021. It is cold. It's going to be 14 below Fahrenheit tonight. And we're not going to get out of this polar vortex for more than a week. You just hope that everything stays together. Anyway, that's it for today. That's it for now. Thanks.